Local police and the FBI team up to identify and track down the deadly gunman, who will stop at nothing to avoid capture, taking thousands of dollars, leaving a bloody trail in their wake.
A new plan, a dangerous gamble. A prisoner awaiting trial in Melbourne has escaped from St. Vincent's Hospital's high-security ward in a daring and meticulously planned breakout. Authorities say the escape unfolded when guards were forced to open a secure door on the hospital's upper level after the prisoner, 23-year-old Binns, suddenly produced a revolver. Described by police as highly dangerous, Binns was awaiting trial for 3 counts of armed robbery. He had been placed in the hospital after being stabbed during a violent altercation in prison. Bleeding heavily from his wounds, he seized the opportunity to disappear into the night, leaving police scrambling in pursuit. The police immediately launched a massive manhunt, deploying helicopters, car patrols, and officers on foot. Despite their best efforts, Binns had vanished without a trace. Authorities believed he might still be hiding somewhere in Melbourne, but they were wrong. By the next day, Binns had already fled the state. Too much heat in Victoria, he later admitted. I needed to be where the pressure wasn't so high, so I went to Sydney. For an entire week, police remained clueless about his whereabouts. But Binns had a problem. He needed money, and he needed it fast. With no legal options available, he resorted to what he knew best: robbing a bank. His impulsive decision proved to be his downfall. An informant tipped off the authorities, revealing that the bank robber in question was none other than Binns. Armed with this information, the armed hold-up squad began surveilling his hideout in Pittwater Road, Boronia Park, near Gladesville. Acting swiftly, detectives raided the property the following night. Binns was arrested without resistance, bringing an abrupt end to his brief time on the run. Melbourne detectives immediately set out for Sydney to seek his extradition. For us, catching an escaped fugitive so quickly was like winning the lottery, one officer remarked. We thought it would take months, but luck was on our side. But for Binns, luck was something he was determined to make for himself. Prison was not the end of the road, only a temporary setback. A second attempt at freedom. This time, Binns found himself incarcerated in Parramatta Correctional Center, a maximum security facility in Sydney, known for housing some of the country's most dangerous criminals. But Binns had no intention of staying put. Within a week of arriving, I had already figured out a way to escape, he later confessed. A prison wall was just a pile of bricks with a bit of mortar. Nothing more. To pull off his second escape, Binns needed tools. He managed to have a hacksaw blade smuggled into the prison, thrown over the wall at a predetermined spot. With this, he meticulously began sawing through the bars of his cell window. To descend from the rooftop, he fashioned a makeshift rope using 2 pairs of bedsheets, cutting and tying them together with carefully knotted loops. For 2 weeks, he worked tirelessly, weakening the iron bars and preparing for his breakout. Finally, on October 25, 1992, at precisely 2:15 p.m., Binns made his move. He lowered himself out of the window with the bedsheet rope, landing on the prison roof. But his plan was far from over. First, he had to maneuver over the razor wire surrounding the perimeter. One wrong move, and he would be torn apart. If my foot had gotten caught, I would have been done for, he recalled. With no other choice, he leaped an astonishing 4.2 meters onto another rooftop, barely managing to cling to the edge. But he wasn't in the clear yet. An officer in the watchtower spotted him and immediately fired a shot. The bullet missed, but now the entire prison was on alert. Still determined, Binns grabbed another makeshift rope, this one secured to an air vent, and began to rappel down. His goal was to reach the outer perimeter fence. Then, disaster struck. His ropes snapped. Binns plummeted 6 meters to the ground, landing hard and breaking his wrist. But adrenaline kept him going. Ignoring the pain, he sprinted toward the perimeter, fully exposed in what was known as the sterile zone, a death trap with watchtowers on all sides. "I was a sitting duck," he later admitted. "If they wanted to kill me, they could have done it right then and there." Bullets rained down, but Binns didn't stop. He scaled the final perimeter fence, narrowly dodging gunfire, and vanished into the streets once again. The IRA's helicopter escape attempt. Across the world, another daring prison break was unfolding, one that seemed straight out of an action movie. It was October 31, 1973, Halloween. In Dublin's Mountjoy prison, a plan was underway to airlift 4 high-profile IRA members to freedom. The operation was carefully orchestrated, but there was an immediate problem. The helicopter they had arranged was late. The pilot, Thomas Boyes, had been enjoying a leisurely lunch. Unaware of the critical role he was about to play in one of the most infamous prison escapes in history, by 3:25 p.m., he finally took off, flying toward Mountjoy. But in the middle of the journey, the man beside him, who had introduced himself as Mr. Leonard, suddenly ordered him to land in a nearby field. 2 masked and heavily armed men approached the helicopter. One held Boyes at gunpoint while the other climbed aboard, demanding that they proceed to the prison. At exactly 3:40 p.m., the helicopter reached Mountjoy's exercise yard. The timing was almost disastrous. One of the intended escapees, Joe Cahill, had already assumed the plan had failed and had returned to his cell. The 8 unarmed guards stationed in the yard were caught completely off guard. "We thought it was a visit from a government minister," one of them later admitted. "It never occurred to us that this was a prison break." With the element of surprise on their side, IRA members Seamus Twomey, Kevin Mallon, and J.B. O'Hagan sprinted toward the helicopter. Other prisoners, realizing what was happening, held back the guards, giving their comrades a few precious seconds to climb aboard. The helicopter was now dangerously overloaded. With a full fuel tank and 5 men aboard, it struggled to lift off. Had Cahill joined them as originally planned, the weight would have been too much and the escape would have ended in catastrophe. But despite the odds, the helicopter ascended, clearing the prison walls. From his cell, Cahill could do nothing but watch as his chance at freedom disappeared into the sky. Below, chaos erupted. Prison officials were in a state of panic, unable to comprehend what had just happened. "Lock the gates!" one guard shouted, though the command was meaningless. The escape was a massive embarrassment for the Irish government. A nationwide manhunt was launched, with over 20,000 security personnel combing the country. But the IRA had planned well. The escapees vanished without a trace, and Mr. Leonard, the mastermind, was never identified. The largest death row breakout in U.S. history. A decade later, in 1984, a group of death row inmates in Mecklenburg Prison, Virginia, pulled off one of the most audacious escapes in U.S. history. Led by the notorious Briley brothers, 6 convicted murderers managed to overpower guards and steal their uniforms. Using stolen radio codes, they tricked security into believing there was a bomb scare. Under this pretense, they convinced guards to send a prison transport van to the back gate. Dressed as officers and carrying a fake bomb on a stretcher, they walked straight out of the facility. By the time the alarm was raised, they were long gone. For a brief moment, it seemed as though they had won, but freedom was short-lived. Over the next few weeks, all 6 were recaptured. Their taste of freedom nothing more than a cruel illusion. From Binns' relentless escapes to the IRA's helicopter breakout and the cunning deception of the Briley brothers, these stories showcase the lengths to which prisoners will go for freedom, whether through brute force, meticulous planning, or sheer audacity, these escapes remain some of the most daring in history. For some, it ended in recapture. For others, it was a clean getaway. But one thing remains clear: prison walls are only as strong as the minds trying to escape them.